What's up, everybody? It's Gorilla Gang Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Little Cam Henry, the Vanilla Gorilla. This is my boy Mark Mathis, a.k.a. the One Man Gang. We're here to talk about different topics. We do got a YouTube channel. It's Gorilla Gang 3421. Want everybody to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. That way you'll get notified anytime we go live and upload a podcast.
And also, we'll take suggestions if you want to leave them about things you might want to hear on the podcast. We'd be more than welcome to talk about them as long as we don't deem them inappropriate.
Well, we're trying to stay away from politics. I know politics is a toxic trait, a toxic topic. Religion, obviously. We both have our own opinions. If you want my opinion, obviously, just go on my Facebook page and you can get mine easily. But yeah, I think those are the only two topics we're trying to stay away from is religion and politics. But today's topics we're going to talk about is movies, and we're not going to go real in depth, but want to start off with one of the easiest questions you can to start off with, and I posed this to Mark a while ago, and what's the first movie that you ever remember seeing in the theater? And we want you guys to comment below, comment on, we're both streaming live on Facebook, comment on our YouTube. What's the first movie you remember going to see in the movie theater? Remember, it doesn't have to be the first movie, but the first one you remember. And Mark's going to kick it off and tell us what the first movie he remembers is.
That's an easy one for me, and it's kind of close to my heart, too, because my father, in my lifetime and his lifetime, took me to see 3 movies. And the first movie I remember seeing in the theater was one I went to see with him, which was Sudden Impact, Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry movie, 1983. At the time, I was 5 years old.
Which I thought was a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie.
Yeah, he thought I was talking about the Sudden
Impact. I thought it was Jean-Claude,
which I found funny. I forget how old I was at that time, but I think I might have been driving at that time.
Yeah, I think that might have been a 90s movie.
Yeah, so I remember the thing I remember mainly about the movie. I don't remember it verbatim at all, but I remember Dirty Harry had a little bulldog in the movie, and I think he actually ended up flirting with the main actress in the movie when he was walking his bulldog or something like that. It's been a while. If anybody is on live and can remember who that actress was or anything, please feel free to chime in. But I remember enjoying it. My dad wasn't a big movie person, so I was kind of like, what are we doing here, and why are we watching this Clint Eastwood movie? But
do you remember if you were allowed to get popcorn?
You know what?
Because some people aren't allowed to get. Some days.
Let me tell you something. Let me go back in history a little bit. Now you might remember this. Remember Newcastle Square Mall?
No, I don't.
Oh man. Okay, so right on 273. Where I guess that's Airport Road. Mm-hmm. There's it's a business center now, and I think Sun National Bank owns the place. But that strip, there's a TD Bank right in front of it, and a credit union too.
No.
That used to be the Newcastle Square Mall.
Okay.
Now they had a James Waste and woman clothing store and a movie theater in there, and an arcade. Those are the only things I can remember. They probably had more. So there was a cheap movie theater in there. My mom used to take us and used to always buy candy outside and put it in her purse and sneak the candy in, and we would have a buffet in there, man. Wow. Not no popcorn. She wasn't buying any stuff from the theater. It was too expensive, and it still is. You go to the movie theater, they got combo meals now. You paying like what you would do to sit down at a restaurant.
A restaurant, not even fast food. Like,
right.
Man, it's a restaurant. I think I put it on Facebook. Me and Selena went to see Star Wars. She got a small little Slurpee. It was $5. I was like, man.
Big Slurpee and Wawa, I think, is like $2, man.
Yeah,
for the biggest
it was literally like $5.49.
Yeah. So, yeah, I remember the other 2 movies my father went to take me to see, just in case you're wondering, was a year later, Terminator. And the
It's
third
a
movie
rated R movie.
Yeah, third movie was Dick
6 years
Tracy.
old and
Right. So the only appropriate movie my dad took me to see for my age was Dick Tracy.
And that wasn't even. I mean, that's questionable whether that was.
Well, honestly, I saw Scarface way too earlier than I should have seen it. My mom had the double VHS tape.
Okay.
She got a VCR and went crazy with just buying movies all the time. So
I think most people that they start off their inappropriateness with horror movies. I think.
Yeah.
I remember being invited to a birthday party, and I was probably like 4 or 5, and they were showing Halloween, and I had to come home. To this day, I can't watch scary movies. I'm not a scary movie person.
No.
That stuff just doesn't.
Your story can't touch mine. So, back at the same movie theater, Newcastle Square Mall, my mom took me to see Return of the Living Dead. The one Brains.
Which now you would think is corny.
Right. I mean, it's cheesy. It's funny. You know, I've watched it recently, but I actually hid behind the seating.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I was so scared of that movie. And my brother and sister just made fun of me for almost the rest of my life for hiding me. I mean, that movie scared the mess out of me at the time, man. Mm. But, it's crazy because I kind of yearn for horror movies to be good now, and they really seem bad now and not scary. You know, the best thing they can do is a cheap jump scare to get at me, you know. Other than that, you know, it doesn't have the same feeling, you know, and maybe that's partly due to they were better back then, or it could be due to the fact that I'm older now and I'm just not subscribing to a lot of bull crap, you know. So
we'll get into mine, but that just made me think of something. So I took Selena to the aquarium, and they have a 4D shark show.
Okay.
And when like there's a sudden like shock, like where the shark comes out, you get poked in the back of the seat. And,
oh wow!
And wouldn't that be cool if the same thing happened in the scary movie, like when there was a shock scene or whatever, that boom, you got popped in the back, man? That would be awesome. But
you know, I
wouldn't be in the theater because I'm telling you now, I'm not going to see no scary movies.
Right. I gotta say one thing. I don't think I've seen a few 3D movies. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen a ton of them, but I've never seen a scary one. I don't think I've ever seen one advertised. If I have, I've forgotten about it. But
yeah, I don't know any 3D scary movies. Nah.
Yeah, not one. Oh, Jason 3 was in 3D.
That was like early 80s. That was like kind of like Jaws 4-ish.
Yeah, I think at the time, from my understanding, the reason why they did it in 3D is it was a big craze at the time.
Yeah. So it's probably around that Jaws 4 where they did Jaws 4 and 3D and all that stuff. But so my first movie was 1981. And 1981 was my first movie, and we went and saw Condor Man, which is funny because it relates to our podcast, because it is like it's a comic book movie about a guy that's he's either a newspaper writer or a comic book writer. If you saw it, you know, comment below. But yeah, Condor Man, he created this superhero persona. Condor Man made a suit. Had the retractable wings that shot out. I think they really only shown him as Condor Man once, like towards the end, and he jumped off the building and like he didn't fly, he just kind of glided. I do remember the scene. He had this old rattly beat up truck, and they were being chased by the bad guys. And he's with the girl, whatever girl he's trying to save, and he's like, this thing can't go any faster. So then he like presses a button, and the whole front of the car, the truck goes down, and then it becomes this like Condor Mobile, which was, you know, it looked kind of like the Mach 5 from Speed Racer, and it just shoots out, leaves the truck as a shell. And those are the only two things I really, really remember about the movie. I couldn't tell you who's in it. I couldn't tell you who played Condor Man, but that was the first movie I remember seeing.
You know, the funny thing about the Condor Man, I had never heard of it, and me and Vanilla Gorilla was having a conversation, and he got to talking about it. He said, look up the trailer, which I would advise you to do, too. But
everybody, look up the trailer on YouTube for Condor Man. It's corny, but just watch it. It's entertaining.
And I looked at it, and I could see how at the time it might have been exciting to see. but I could also see the cheesiness of it, which the 80s had a lot of cheese to it. But instantly, I think I said to you that it kind of reminded me of Jim Cotta a little bit. Not that the films were similar, but how cheesy they were. If you've never seen Jim Cotta, okay, just to go into it real quick, is it was about a guy who was actually really a gymnast. Like the guy was a gymnast in real life, and I guess they want to make an action movie slash karate movie slash gymnast movie. Which, if you see it, it doesn't translate well. It's a bunch of crazy people in a town, and he comes up to a corner, and there's like this convenient thing shaped like a gym horse, that he starts doing his thing on and kicking people. But, I got the same type of feeling when he told me to look at Condor Man.
But Condor Man, it was a Disney movie, though.
Yeah.
So it was made by Disney. So it was around the time where Disney was doing... It was before TGIF and all that stuff. And Disney had one night where they would play like a made-for-TV movie. I think they had the Electric Night with Ernie Reyes, where he would do this, and something on his headband would light up, and his father was in it, and Bolo from.
Bolo Young.
I think Bolo was in it.
Okay.
They had the Misfits of Science that came on that. I think it was Courtney Cox from Friends, her first acting job, and they all had powers as teenagers. There's one dude, he touched his neck and he became 7'2". So it was around that time. So it was kind of the precursor to that Disney special movie night. I guess they tried to have like a family movie night every Saturday or Friday. I can't remember exactly what day it was, but yeah. So. You want to talk about the next movie, or you want?
Oh yeah, sure. So what we want to get into is just some movies that we enjoyed. We're not saying any of these are the best movies we ever seen. Also, we're going to talk about some recent movies that we saw in the theater as well. The first movie I want to touch on, and this is probably, when I make a list of what's your favorite movies, this movie always comes up for me. But and probably comes up for a lot of you too out there, but Scarface, the 1983 Scarface, which is actually supposedly loosely a remake of the one from 1932. There are a lot of differences in the movie, but Scarface is the first. I didn't see it in the theater. It came out in 1983 as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I didn't see it in the theater, but my mom had got a VCR when I was really young, and I don't know if she was part of Columbia House or whatever, but we had like different movies all the time. I remember we got E.T. one Christmas, so I sat there watching it.
I hate that movie, man.
Oh, I love that movie.
I hate E.T. I did not care that they brought back Dude and E.T. in the commercial.
Yeah.
I always hated E.T.
Nah, I loved E.T. I don't know how I would feel watching it now, but Scarface was the first double VHS tape I ever remember having. I put this movie in, and I sat there and watched the first tape, and when it got to the intermission, I couldn't wait to put the second tape in.
So you remember what happened at the intermission that it stopped on?
Yeah, he was talking to Michelle Pfeiffer. He said, "Who do I trust? Me. That's who."
I mean, I've seen it, so I knew it. So I just wanted to know if you remembered.
Listen, I can almost do that whole movie verbatim.
I think a lot of people can.
I've watched it too many times. I have it on Blu-ray now.
Oh, okay.
So it's like when I say it's one of my favorite movies by far, easily. One thing about Scarface that people don't talk about much, if you ever watch that movie, if you go back and watch Scarface, there's one person that did good acting. Everybody else was horrible in that movie. Al Pacino was the only good actor in that movie. Now, I'm not saying the other actors and actresses weren't good. They did not do a good job in that movie. Think about Frank. You remember Frank, the guy Scarface was working for? How bad was his Cuban accent? Yo, Tony, please, man.
You know what a Hassa is, Frank?
Right, yeah.
Frank.
Everybody's accent was horrible. The best two accents were Manolo and Tony Montana. Michelle Pfeiffer was cool in it, but, she was geeked up the whole time.
I don't think the sister was too bad.
No, the sister was okay, actually, but her accent was horrible. Once again,
well, she wasn't like Cuban. She was more American. She was here. So
Americanized.
So yeah.
still it's with all that bad acting, it's one of the greatest movies.
I think it's the storyline.
Yeah, the storyline is great.
Storyline makes it, and the dialogue. Even though the dialogue, like you're saying, that if you're looking for authentic accent, then yeah, it's going to be off. But just the dialogue, just how it was written, and what they had to say was good. Not necessarily maybe the delivery.
And I'll go this far: Al Pacino did such a good job in it. That's the first movie I saw him in. When I saw him in his second movie, and he was talking like he was American, I'm like, yo, isn't he Cuban? I really thought he was Cuban for a minute. But remember, I was very young when I first saw the movie. I had another connection with Scarface because I was a big music guy, I still am. Mm-hmm. And the Ghetto Boys were big at the time. And they sampled almost that whole movie. Mm-hmm. I'm like, yo.
Mr. Scarface.
Yeah, I'm like, every good scene in that movie is sampled on some Ghetto Boys album. Mm-hmm. It was just
sampled
a great movie.
in Money Talks when Chris Tucker's on the bus.
Oh, yeah.
Something else. But yeah, it's widely repeated in pop culture.
Yeah.
Just some of the lines.
And if you've never seen the movie, just a quick rundown. Tony Montana, who's played by Al Pacino, is a Cuban refugee who makes his way over here on a boat, as stereotypically a lot of Cubans have. And when he gets here, he just gets tangled up into a world of crime. I think the first crime he committed...
Well, they put him... Well, so they don't allow him to come as an actual refugee, so they put him in essentially like a concentration camp in like Freedom Town or whatever I think it was called, underneath an overpass that just had a bunch of chains on it.
Yeah.
And he had to... essentially, he did the local drug guy a favor by killing this dude, Emilio Rabanga, to get out of Freedom Town.
Right.
And then, he starts working for the drug guy.
And he eventually meets up with Frank. He's working for a lower class guy. I forget his name. It's the one that played in Last Action Hero. They said he's always a bad guy.
Yeah.
So he ended up working for him. He met Frank, who was,
he's working for the lieutenant, basically.
Yeah.
And then, the lieutenant turns out to be a snitch from the Colombian drug lord. The Colombian drug lord has him executed. And then he goes to work for Frank. And then inevitably.
Then things don't necessarily go smooth with Frank. And
well, in all actuality, it was more that he wanted Frank's girl. And that's kind of what kicked off the whole beef is he wanted the Michelle Pfeiffer character. He wanted his girl, so he started making moves on his girl, and then eventually was like, you know what, screw it, I'll just take over your whole business and your wife, and that's kind of where it went.
Yeah. Hey, shout out to Lori Dawson. I think Lori has watched every podcast we've done on live. Shout out to Lori. Lori, thank you. Keep watching. Everybody else who's watching, we appreciate you.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Everybody that watches on our live, everybody that's clicked on our YouTube channel, make sure you like all the videos. Give us ideas, like Mark said in the beginning. I think you have more, and then I only have one movie that I was going to talk about today, and it's a more modern, so we're going to let Mark...
Yeah. Two more movies I'm going to talk about real quick, and then we'll get into more recent movies. A movie that I really liked that never particularly took off, but I thought it was a real quality movie. It's a movie called Run that came out in 1991 that stars Patrick Dempsey. Basically what this movie is about, I think Patrick Dempsey, if I'm not mistaken, is a student at a college in Boston. I'm not sure what kind of school, if it's like a medical or lawyer school. But he's working for this rich guy who asked him to drop his Porsche off from Boston to Atlantic City. Mm-hmm. So when he gets to Atlantic City, his car breaks down. Okay, he catches a cab, and the cab driver mistakes him for like this high roller. So he takes him to a casino, an underground casino. And Patrick Dempsey goes there, and he's cleaning up. And the unfortunate thing is the guy he's cleaning up on is a mob boss's son. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the mob boss is getting pissed off, and they, get into a fight. And the whole time Patrick Dempsey is telling him, look, man, I don't want to fight you. The guy's super aggressive. He goes after Patrick. Patrick moves out the way. He trips over something, hits his head, and he dies. So of course the mob boss is, the father, who's the mob boss, puts a $50,000 bounty on his kid's head, and it's just a whole cat and mouse game of them chasing him around. Different police under the payroll of this guy.
So let me stop you. So my dad is watching our live, and this is a dude that took me to Return of the Jedi, I think, Empire Strikes Back, Superman 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. So this dude took me to a lot of movies when I was a kid, since we're talking about movies.
Hey, what's up, Pops?
So,
hey, I also want to give a shout out to Christine Mathis, the most beautiful woman watching today. Hope you enjoy. So Run. Basically, this guy has the whole town paid off, and his kid's trying to run now. He doesn't know who to trust or what have you. Don't want to give the end of the movie away or anything, but if you haven't seen Run, which, like I said, came out in 1991, it's a very good movie. I think it might have been my introduction to Patrick Dempsey. So if you get a chance,
not me.
No,
I'll tell you right now, not me.
No, it's not. Can't Buy Me Love.
Can't Buy Me Love. I have Can't Buy Me Love on DVD right over there.
Yeah, I forgot about it.
Can't Buy Me Love and Loverboy. I don't know if you ever saw Loverboy.
If I have, I don't remember.
So he was an underage student, and no, he was in college, and he didn't have enough money for the next semester. Worked at a pizza store, and started delivering pizzas to all these houses, and basically none of the husbands were home, and he delivered the movie. He delivered the pizzas, but it was like Deuce Bigelow before Deuce Bigelow, but it was him delivering pizzas. So yeah, that was Loverboy.
See, that's the thing about 80s movies, is I've seen so many of them that I don't always remember the name.
No, I remember. I used to love Loverboy. That was a hilarious movie.
Wow.
It was funny to watch.
The last movie I want to talk about real quick is another one that I thought was a great movie. Didn't do well in the box office, but it stars my second favorite actor of all time, which is Michael Keaton. Denzel is probably my first. It's called Desperate Measures. Came out in 1998.
I've seen Desperate Measures.
You did see that?
Andy Garcia.
Andy Garcia, yep. Andy Garcia is a cop, and excuse me. Michael Keaton plays this criminal, this sociopath named Peter McCabe. Mm-hmm. And what happens is...
who's basically Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, pretty much.
If you need a reference point.
Pretty
Hannibal
much, but
Lecter.
I don't think he was actually a cannibal, was he?
No, he wasn't. I mean, he wasn't a cannibal, but he was a criminal on the level of Hannibal Lecter. Don't let him out, chain him up, put his mask on his face, everything. That's how bad he was.
He was a genius in this movie. And Andy Garcia's character was a cop, and he needed desperately a bone marrow transplant for his son, who was 9. Mm-hmm. And he broke into, I think, the FBI headquarters or something like that, and found a match, which happened to be Michael Keaton's
The only
match out there. So he goes to Michael Keaton, and I remember he said to him, look, I don't have time to play around. I'm going to ask you this once. My son needs a bone marrow transplant. You're the only match. Will you do it? And Michael Keaton was like, well, I can't answer that right now. And Andy Garcia was like, you need to. He was like, well, if I got to answer right now, let the little bastard die. Which I thought was cold.
Cold, ruthless, but hey.
But Michael Keaton eventually thought about it and found a way that he could possibly do this for the kid, or at least appear to do it for the kid, and also break out of the prison. So what he does is he goes to another inmate and asks for some type of drug, which is an anti-drug in a sense. In other words, it would make it so when they use the
anesthesia.
Yeah, anesthesia on him, it would not work. Right. So he did that. He broke out.
He thought that would be his way to escape. I'll agree to do this, but I'm going to take this anti-anesthesia so that I can get up off this table, and I'm going to be out, because y'all think I'm knocked out.
Right. So he did that, and he had one of the hospital workers, I believe, by knife point, and Andy Garcia had a gun on him. And Michael Keaton,
and he couldn't shoot him, because if you shoot him, you ruin the bone marrow. So he was in. It kind of put him in this double-edged dilemma. Mm-hmm. I can't shoot him because then my son won't get the blood transfusion. But I can't. I'm a police detective. I can't let him kill some innocent person either.
Right.
So.
Right. So that became the dilemma, and once again, Andy Garcia had to keep Michael Keaton alive. During this movie to ensure that his son got the
right while he's an escaped convict, and people know that he's such a crazy lunatic. Like there's everybody else's mentality is shoot on sight, and his mentality is I got to save this dude, otherwise, because if they kill him, my son dies.
Right, and Andy Garcia was actually taken off of the case, and they were escorting him out of the hospital, and he ended up finding a way back in, basically to essentially protect Michael Keaton. What movie was you going to talk about?
So the only movie I had to talk about, and it's relevant, it's up for I think 8, maybe 6 Oscars. Is Joker. So I've seen Joker 3 times in the theater and probably twice here at the house. So that's 5 times just in the time that it's been released. And it gets a lot of criticism because it's based off of a superhero villain, although it's not. It has no superheroes in it. I mean, obviously Bruce Wayne is in it, but he's like 8 or right around the time where his parents are died.
Oh yeah, spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care if you haven't seen Joker by now. That's on you. I mean, sorry. I mean, hey, I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, so Joker is essentially, a movie about the people in the world that are just overlooked, just kicked all the time. Nobody pays attention to them. Nobody really pays attention to what their impact of how they treat them is until there's a reaction to that treatment. And speaking as a middle child and somebody that wasn't overly popular in high school, I can remember being teased when I was in the 6th grade because I was young. I was a couple years ahead. I skipped kindergarten and 1st grade. So I was like 9 years old in the 6th grade, and they used to call me Baby 9 every day. Oh, here come Baby 9, here come Baby 9. Which is ironic now because I'm way bigger than everybody I went to school with. And nobody would call me that now. But, so I remember being teased. I'm a product of interracial marriage. Back in the 70s, not now, where it's acceptable. But back then, I used to get called zebra, all types of stuff. So the movie kind of resonated with me because I know how it feels to be that guy, the guy that's picked on. I was 12 years old in high school, super young. Wasn't the 6'2", 300-pound monster I am now. So I got picked on a lot. I was in the band. I didn't play football. I was a soccer player growing up. So I got teased because most everybody that was cool played football. I played soccer. So in all those aspects, I was able to relate with the movie. And it just is a great movie. Just Joaquin Phoenix alone, just the acting in it, and you can't watch that movie and think that that's just Joaquin Phoenix. When you watch that movie, you're like, wow, he really is, Arthur.
Transformation.
He's really Arthur. That doesn't look anything like Joaquin Phoenix. So I think some of the Oscars are well deserved, like the way the movie was shot. I think just it was like a weird, not really creepy darkness, but it was like a sad, somber darkness. So the cinematography in the movie was awesome. The story was awesome. The acting was amazing. I would even venture to say...
Can I pause you for one brief second?
Yeah.
John Sikowski, the Eagles are not in the playoffs, so there's no go for them. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, it was almost so much about that movie was good. And then if you were, or you ever have been, kicked while you were down, treated like shit and all that stuff, the end was like satisfying, not like, it wasn't like, wow, this dude's a psychopathic murderer. It was like, you know what? He did that for all of us. For every time that I felt like that, thank you, Arthur. Call me Joker. Call me Joker Gorilla for the rest of the night.
You know what's funny about that movie is I originally had no interest in it when the trailers came on and everything. I had no interest. My buddy went to see it. Shout out Sir Blanco. My buddy went to see it, and he kept telling me how good it was, and he was saying he would go see it a second time. So finally, I said, "Okay, I'll go with you and see the movie." I sat there, and from pretty much the beginning of the movie, I was into it. I was very satisfied with it. I thought Joaquin's Phoenix acting was tip top. I thought the content was great. It wasn't what I expected. It didn't feel per se like what you would think a Joker movie would be. Okay.
It wasn't the typical Batman's Joker storyline where he falls in the vat of acid.
Right.
He blah blah blah, and that's why I say if you're going in and you think it's a comic book movie, yeah, you might be upset. Like that's like watching a Star Wars movie and there's no Jedi in it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
well, I kind of did expect it, but I had been told at some point before I went to see it that it's not exactly like that.
Right.
It wasn't. But I think it touched more on mental illness than anything.
Yes.
And I got to tell you, maybe I'm a little mentally ill because every time he laughed, I laughed. Like it was. I mean, when he would have the outburst for no reason.
So I watched something on that, and he said that every time he did
49ers. Sorry.
No, I get it. Football. He said every time that he did it, it was different, and sometimes it felt organic, and sometimes it felt horrible. And they took some of the takes that he wasn't really, especially he didn't like. Like when he watches them, he doesn't like it. But he said he practiced it, but it never came out the same way. With the same greatness that he thought at some points that it did, a lot of other times it didn't. So, yeah, it was cool.
It tickled me when he was on the bus. And
when he was on the bus.
Around. It tickled me when he was on the train before they started kicking him.
Yes. I killed him because they couldn't carry a tune.
Yeah, it just... I can't find anything really wrong with the
Thanks,
movie.
John.
Can't find anything wrong with the movie at all.
I think I will say this: in some places it gets a little slow, but not to the point where you're like, I'm bored, I'm gonna fall asleep. So I mean, it did get slow at some point, like when he was like going to see the girl and all that stuff, because it didn't really serve a purpose in the end, because. When you find out, again, it's a spoiler, but if you haven't seen it, I don't care. You should see it by now. But yeah, when he figures out that he's been hallucinating the whole relationship with the girl, nothing really happened because of it, and because of that, it kind of didn't serve a purpose. But that's in hindsight. I also think where it loses a lot of comic book people is Arthur is probably well into his 40s in the movie, and Bruce is like 8.
Right.
So when Bruce technically becomes Batman when he's 21, 22 years old, in the comic book world, how old is Joker? 60, 70? So, I think that might have...
I didn't have a problem with that because...
But hardcore comic people, though, they're going to be like, wow, how can he be the Joker and he's 20 years older than Bruce Wayne, and so I get that. I understand that.
What's crazy is you touched on comics. If I can tell a real quick comic book story, and then you get back to where you were. So I used to collect comics when I was a lot younger. Okay, I got to the age at some point, I don't remember what age it was, where I knew that these things had a value to them. So I think
you told me this story.
Yeah, I told you. Started getting the plastic and the cardboard back and everything to preserve the comics, and I had built me up a collection. I even had a bunch of number ones. Now, it was a comic book Image and another comic book Malibu.
Image was part of Marvel.
Oh, okay. And then Malibu Comics.
I believe Mike Romanoli. Tell me, it was Image part of Marvel? It was part of one of them, but I believe Image was part of Marvel.
Gotcha. So I had the number one to a Malibu comic called Prime. I had the number one called Mantra. And I had the number 0 and number 1 of Wildcats, which was a Image comic. My brother went to Ferris. Love my brother to death. It wasn't his fault. He went to Ferris. My mother decided that he wanted him to have something to read. She didn't write on the plastic that the comics were in. She took the comics out of the plastic and wrote my brother's name on the front of
the comics,
and ruined everyone. From that day forward, I kind of stopped reading comics. I think the comic that made me start reading them again, but not, on a heavy level, was the Walking Dead comics, okay? I stopped collecting comics, except once again I bought some of those Walking Dead comics just to try to get ahead of the series story. And then, I started seeing differences, so... that was a good comic to me, by the way. And I think that was an Image comic, wasn't it? The Walking Dead?
Walking Dead was part of Marvel. It was kind of Marvel-ish. Okay. Yeah.
So that is my comic book story of why I don't collect them anymore or even really read them anymore. However, I do collect Marvel Legend figures. But that's a whole nother story.
So my comic book story is I was not allowed to read comics as a kid. My mom said that they were for lower class individuals. Shout out to Mean Gene. And that if you wanted to read something, you didn't need pictures to read it. You should read a book. So I wasn't allowed to read comics. I remember I would go up the street to a friend's house and I would sit there and read his comics. I did start collecting comics in about 1988, 89. I do have the first comic I ever bought sitting over at my desk. And I do have quite a nice comic book collection downstairs in a comic book shelf. But that's about it. We're trying to shorten up these podcasts and these lives because we don't want you guys to have to sit for an hour, but we're going to try to do them weekly. So we're going to produce a little bit more of them. We're working on getting a better camera, better microphone. I know, we kind of have the basic setup here, but we're working to build some better content and to be able to give you guys a better image, a little bit better sound. We appreciate everybody's interaction on both of our Facebook Lives as well as YouTube. Questions and comments. Make sure you hit us up on Facebook or Gorilla Gang 3421 YouTube. We'll post a link when we post the video so you guys can subscribe. And that's about it.
Real quick,
for us.
I want to give a shout out to Sean Young. I ran into this brother at the gas station, and one of the first things he said to me is, "Don't you have a podcast now?" So I appreciate you watching. Please subscribe and like, man, and hopefully we'll get much more content out there that you guys like, which I'm sure will be coming soon. I think.
And guest stars. We have a lot of people interested in coming on with us and sitting down with us. John Zukowski right here. He's asking online. Of course, this dude has a lot of knowledge about Philly way back in the day and all that stuff, which would be interesting.
We gotta do a fishing podcast with John.
I'm not doing a fishing podcast with John until John take me fishing.
Yeah, well, I've been fishing with John.
John been bullshitting me for years. I told him crab season, come get me because I don't want to pay no $200 for crabs. Let me come get crabs for free down there with you.
Me and John caught quite a bit of catfish one morning. We had got off work and went right to it, man.
Yeah, man. So yeah, John, you're not allowed on the podcast until you take me fishing and crabbing. But yeah, so we got a lot of people that have asked to come on. Obviously we're doing them weekly now because they're a little bit shorter. But yeah, give us your ideas, give us your comments, feedback, and all that stuff. And for the Gorilla Gang, we out of here, y'all.
Peace.